Afghanistan, and we're very lucky to have her here. Please give a warm welcome to Mitra Qayoom. Thank you.
Thank you to Stop the War for organizing this conference and for having me here. Now, if history has taught us anything, is that the US has always relied on criminals, dictators, and human rights violators in order to serve its own imperialistic interests. They've done this in Libya, in Syria, in other parts of Africa, and for decades in Afghanistan. Washington's recent attempt in Afghanistan includes the strengthening of the current puppet regime by including the Taliban in the peace negotiation. Now, let me tell you why this is a bad idea and not accepted by the Afghan people. After the fall of the Taliban, the US placed the warlords in power, the same warlords who took the lives of thousands of innocent Afghans and displaced millions during the civil war. The Taliban took Afghanistan back to the Stone Age with their barbaric punishment laws. Now, both these groups are criminals and are responsible for much of the suffering of the Afghan people. The Afghan people do not want them running the country. They want them prosecuted for all the crimes they've committed. Uniting these groups will only serve the US and NATO's interests in Afghanistan, but will lead to another reign of terror and brutalities upon the Afghan people. How long are the West going to feed us the lie that they're in Afghanistan to liberate the Afghan women? If their aim was women liberation, then why is the West backing up criminals and human rights violators such as the warlords who are just as dark-minded and misogynist as the Taliban? During the civil war, they were responsible for the rape of hundreds and hundreds of Afghan women and young girls. Girls used to set themselves on fire and jump off buildings in order to escape these monsters. I ask you, if your daughter was raped by the warlords, or the Taliban burst into your son's wedding, massacred your family because they were celebrating by playing music and dancing, what would you do? Would you negotiate with them, or would you want justice? There has been very little change, and in most areas, no change at all in the position of the Afghan women today under NATO occupation. Domestic violence and street harassment are on a rise. The reason for this is lack of education and increase in poverty, which is the consequence of the current and the previous wars. Poverty forces young boys and men to quit school and start work at an early age to feed their families. And we're not talking about jobs in offices. We're talking about setting up a stall on the corner of the street and selling fruits and vegetables. Most days, these men don't make much, and this leads to frustration and stress, which then comes out on the wife when they return home. Around 3,500 cases of violence against women have been recorded in the first 6 months of last year alone. In many provinces, hundreds of schools have closed down. Women have no security going to school or working. They have acid thrown in their faces, raped, and stoned to death on a daily basis, which is not reported in the media. In many places, including in Kabul, killing a woman is still as easy as killing a fly. And due to lack of justice and pressure on women, 2,300 cases of suicide were recorded among the Afghan women last year. The Afghan women message to the world is, I quote Khurshid Nouri, who is a member of the Afghan Women's Skills Development Center, which is an organization that provides shelter for women who have escaped their abusive husbands and families. We don't want just words, we want action. We don't want to be hugged by Hillary Clinton or Bush, have our pictures taken, shaking hands with them, given fake promises, and then be forgotten. They, the US and NATO, don't care about the Afghan women or people. They are here for our resources. They started this mess, and they can stop it by leaving. And as an Afghan woman myself, who strongly supports and believes in women's rights, I do not believe this can be achieved by military intervention and occupation. Women's rights and human rights, as well as peace and stability, can only be achieved by the immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops out of Afghanistan and by the rehabilitation of the country through education and humanitarian aid. It is time that the US and its NATO allies realize that bombing Afghan women will not liberate them. What would you choose to liberate you? A gun pointing on your head, or education, the rule of law, or justice? Poverty is increasing because more and more Afghans flee their hometowns due to increased airstrikes on their homes and on their children, due to having their homes raided every night, or because their homes and farms have been destroyed. They've been left with nothing and are forced to move to Kabul, where they live in refugee camps and beg on the streets to feed their families. I met refugees from Helmand, Paktia, Kapisa, and Farah provinces when I visited one of the many refugee camps in Kabul. I spoke with them and asked them what they thought about this war and whether or not they believe NATO is winning this war. The reply I got was, "This war has destroyed our homes and our lives, is killing our children, destroying our country and our people. The US and NATO war is a war for power and resources. This war started with a lie, and any war that starts with a lie will never be won. They are losing this war every day." There is a huge increase in mental health issues. The effects of decades of war, including the 11 years occupation by the US and NATO, has left Afghan men, women, and children with mental illnesses, including anxiety, depression, suicide, and post-traumatic stress disorders. Drug addiction has also increased in the last 11 years under the watchful eye of NATO, and many Afghans suffering from mental illnesses turn to self-medication and in most cases to heroin or opium. War trauma has been found to be the key factor for the 1 million Afghans with drug problems. This includes men, women, and children as young as 9 years old. We often talk about the effects of war on men and women, but we forget children who are the most vulnerable victims of war. A recent report has found that 80% of all children felt frightened, sad, and unable to cope, and 90% believe they will die in the war. Today, Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries in the world, despite of being rich in natural resources, where most children don't live long enough to see their 5th birthday. But it is in the eyes of these children that I saw hope, and if anyone can change Afghanistan, it will be these children. This war is killing the children and the future of Afghanistan. It breaks my heart to think what will become of these children when they grow up. Will they become sex slaves, opium brides, or recruited by the Taliban and used as suicide bombers? Afghanistan is also the second most corrupt country in the world today. Millions of dollars of aid have been poured into the country, but where has all that money gone? I can tell you that from what I saw, it does not go to the poor and where it is needed the most. It is the warlords and the criminals who have become rich from all that money. Afghanistan is more unstable today than ever. The Taliban are more stronger than ever. It is the innocent Afghans who have been sandwiched between enemies and pay the highest price of the so-called war on terror. Many people have asked me, do you think there will be a complete withdrawal of troops in 2014? I asked the Afghan people the same question during my visit to Kabul, who have confirmed my answers. They said, the US will never withdraw its troops out of Afghanistan because they have geopolitical and strategic interest in the region. If the US leaves, then other powerful countries like China and Russia will try to take control of the country and its resources, which is something that the US will never allow to happen. The talk about the 2014 withdrawal is to create tension and to make the Afghans think that they're not safe and secure without foreign troops. If the West wanted peace and stability in Afghanistan, they would have achieved this a long time ago. They only want relative stability in order to continue this occupation and to maintain military bases in Afghanistan. The Afghan people have had their right to self-determination taken away from them, but given the chance, they're more than capable of running and rebuilding their own country back together. But with the endemic corruption, decades of interference, and the continuing war on terror, it will be a long time before the hands of Western imperialists will let go of the country. But Afghans have never and will never accept domination by foreign invaders. There is a reason why Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. I want you to imagine a cycle, and at the top of the cycle, I want you to place war and occupation. War and occupation leading to instability, poverty, lack of education, corruption, mental health issues, domestic violence, and death, which can occur at each stage of the cycle. And it is by eliminating war and occupation from the cycle that we will slowly start to see improvement in all the areas mentioned. For the US and its NATO allies, the well-being of the Afghan people has no value, but it has to us, and that's why we're here today. So let's break this cycle by fighting even harder this year to end this war and occupation and bring the troops home. As Bertolt Brecht once said, those who struggle may fail, but those who don't struggle have already failed. So let's struggle together and fight for a better and peaceful world without wars, even if it means we might fail in the process. Thank you.